All right, our next perspective, and we're going to get into these more deeply once we have some concrete examples, but I want you to go over these bullet points, and then there's some additional readings on the back of the packet that I'm asking you to do tonight in preparation for some articles of literary criticism that you're actually going to be working on Wednesday when I'm not here. Okay, archetypal. No one ever sat you down when you were a little child and started to explain to you all the myths and figures and story patterns that we come across. But as we go through things, as we read storybooks when we're children, as we watch movies, we begin to see patterns develop. And we're not even really conscious of the patterns, but they begin to fill what is referred to our collective unconscious, so that we understand certain things. We understand that if an author uses a river, as we'll see in Huck Finn, that there is some kind of journey motif. There's an implication that there is a beginning and an end to this story, and that there are events that are going to take place along this journey, along this river, that are going to be meaningful in terms of the text. Examines images, figures, myths, and story patterns shared by people across diverse cultures. You can go to various cultures, you will come across a flood account. Just like the biblical account of the flood, the idea of cleansing that comes with the flood, the idea of new beginnings, that is generated in many cultures. We have the unrequited lover. We have the idea of the snake, the devil, the trickster. And quickly write down on your sheet, what were the stories that we had that involved the snake and the trickster, the black man, those types of things. When we get to Gatsby, green and prosperity and the things associated with the color are going to be important. Archetypes we seek to identify archetypes within works to expose the meaning of such figures in the work. So the meaning of the archetype itself then becomes apparent in the work and helps us to make meaning of the work. Analyzes certain recurring images, character types, which we know the word motif refers to those patterns, recurring patterns. Believes these occurrences in literature create or hold meaning, as I said, in the collective unconscious, a meaning understood across cultural boundaries. So if you wrote down a story named To Snake and Devil and Black Men, share that with somebody right now. I talked about the flood. We've talked about the frontier hero. Our idea of the frontier hero began in Last of the Mohicans when we looked at Leatherstocking kills his first Indian. But you can go to the frontier hero and you can apply that to Luke Skywalker in Star Wars. All right, so it crosses the boundaries of time or culture. I talked about nature. Cinderella figure. This concept is played over time and time again. The poor girl taken into a mean household, usually mean women, mothers, stepdaughters, things like that. And so there we have this poor soul who then in some way is transposed into a beautiful princess. Life turns out well, and everyone lives happily ever after. Hero journeys repeated again and again and again. As we get into modernism, names like Jack Kerouac, who writes On the Road, these hero journeys are not always so heroic. They may be heroic in nature, but we don't have the happy endings. We don't always have the knight riding off with the girl. And it's often more a psychological struggle than it is a physical struggle. The physical struggle comes early in life. The Garden of Eden, again, an Old Testament biblical allusion, paradise corrupted by the presence of sin. And that can be played out in many ways. Fire, we saw it in the crucible, the symbol of cleansing, purity, what it does, how it makes things right. And then we have white, the virginity, the purity, and the green of the prosperity or new birth. So I want you to consider those. Now, psychological. This is a fairly new lens, not brand new, but psychology is our newest science. So now, and again, we will see this as we leave realism, Huck Finn. You're going to be reading Occurrence at Owl Creek. There's a bit of psychology in there, but as we start to move into the stories in the future, there's a lot more having to do with the way people think. And the way you think impacts the way you behave. And modern writers now that we're moving away from the land, people are not living on the land. We're not in an agricultural society. We're much more in an urban setting. We begin to see this in 20th century literature, where more time is spent on the way people think. There's less physical action in works and much more having to do with the mind. Explores and analyzes literature in terms of a mental process, focuses on the belief that there are recurrent patterns of development for most people, makes educational guesses as to what or who has been repressed or transformed in an individual's life, thinking, patterns, and behavior. Attempts to apply a developmental concept to the text. An Oedipus complex, Freud's psychological theories. I'm going to have given to you the thought process on the id, the ego, the super ego, all of those things. That's part of Freud's philosophy. Gender confusion, and considers how repressed material, I don't mean physical material, the thinking of your past, your history, your experiences, may be exposed in the text patterns of imagery, symbols, or setting. So if we even went all the way back to The Devil and Tom Walker, although to do a psychological analysis in the time of The Devil and Tom Walker would have been strange, but for us to do it, we can certainly go back and study how greed drove him to this impossible situation, blinded him to any of the realities. We could look at Young Goodman Brown as well, think about how depressed he was after the reality of his situation came upon him. And so we see, even at the end of that Hawthorne gives us a psychological effect on the character. So we're studying the psyche, we're studying the mind, we're studying the thought process. Okay, the last piece is sometimes the hardest. Most students have the most difficult time with the reader response and the new criticism, formalism. Focuses on formal patterns, excludes subject matter and social values. Think of yourself as sliding your piece of fiction or literature under a microscope and only being able to look at the book itself. Everything else would be blocked out. You're not going to bring your gender to it. You're not going to bring any history to it. You're not going to bring any biographical information of the author to it. You're not going to bring any context of meaning from any social thinking at the time, but you're looking at what happens in the work itself. How does it make meaning? Analyzes the structure, pattern, and the genre within the work. Determines tensions, ambiguities, and oppositions. We are certainly very familiar with the fact that Hawthorne is a master of ambiguity. And so if we were to study the text, we would study all the appearances of ambiguity throughout the text. And those are the things that we would make meaning. We would go and say, all right, if we look at the collective study of all the places that are left ambiguous to us, what does it mean? What is Hawthorne trying to communicate? Close reading is very required here. Tracking, tracing, looking at literary devices, and again, asking ourselves how they make meaning. Analyze what unifies the work. Another piece in Scarlet Letter is the light imagery. I want you to think about that for a moment, and as we come to the end of the video, when the video is off, I want you on your sheet of paper to respond to how does the use of light in Scarlet Letter create unity within the work. Just a couple of sentences. You can feel free to speak with one another. That's perfectly fine. I just want you to see that, begin to see how a reoccurring motif, pattern, thought process, imagery in a work can, in some ways, convey the meaning, the entire meaning of the work. All right, before I sign off today, I want you to look at the rest of your packet. You will see sheets there called critical approaches. You are to read, highlight, and annotate the critical approaches. You have one on the definition of feminist criticism. You have another on new historicism, or formalism is the other title. You have the definition of psychoanalytical criticism, definition of reader response criticism, and new criticism, and formalism. All right, those last two, I'm sorry, the new historicism is the one that deals with the biographical information and the historical information, and new criticism and formalism go hand in hand. So tonight, for homework, Tuesday night, what I'd like you to do is RHA those particular packets so that you fill in all the knowledge in terms of literary criticism and analysis. And please feel free as you're RHAing to ask questions, and come prepared tomorrow because I'm going to leave several articles. I'm going to divide you up in different groups, and I'm going to ask you to specifically read the articles of literary criticism I'm giving you. I will designate as to the particular lens that is used in the article so that you can see how it's used, and I want you to RHA those articles. I will have them handed out to you. You are not going to go into groups tomorrow. You are going to sit and read your article in and of itself. I want this packet next to you, and I want you to go back and forth between the articles in order to discover aspects of the criticism, highlight it, underline it, ask questions of it, bring some understanding about it, and I want you to really begin to apply this. This is part of your literary research paper, so getting a grasp on literary criticism is really important. I will be in and out of school tomorrow on Wednesday, but I probably will not be here for class. And then on Thursday, we're going to do a jigsaw activity with the literary criticism, and then you'll be part of a group, a collective group, with different representations of the criticism in the group, and you will be the expert helping to disseminate the information to the group. I miss you all. I will see you when I return. Thank you.